all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon.
Oh yes. There will be blood.
You survived my first test, but you continue to bear your way.
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy. And today we're going to be talking about my favorite fucking franchise. That's right, we are talking about Saw 2. So sit back, relax, let's get this shit started.
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
I ain't no fucking clown. That is better.
Now clear your minds. He knows what scares you.
I'm just gonna bash your brains.
What the hell? The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
Now, everybody loves popcorn.
Now, if you're a diehard fan of the Saw franchise, such as myself, and, you know, even if you don't dabble into the whole Saw franchise because it's, you know, a little bit too gruesome or anything like that, everybody will tell you they've seen Saw 2. And the reason why they've seen Saw 2 is because of the fact it was the game changer of the franchise. It gave the most backstory of everything. I mean, you kind of figured out, you know, a little bit more about Jigsaw, who he was, and, you know, you find out more about his name and his character. Then you find out a little bit more about other reoccurring characters that follow into the story and then later on throughout the whole sequels. But I remember Saw 2 when it came out. It came out in October 28th, 2005, I believe. And I remember when I heard that they were making a part 2, I was just like, holy shit! You know, the horror fan in me was just flipping the fuck out because if you've seen the first one was so great, and the way they ended it, and the way that they originally planned for Saw was that it was just going to be a one-and-done film, right? But, you know, Lionsgate, once they realized that, hey, we can make some money off of this thing, because they already released the film twice, right? So they had it in 2003, they had it in 2004, because 2003 was independent film, right? 2004, Lionsgate bought it, they released it all over, and then that's when they said, oh shit, we got a franchise. So that's when they started doing it. They gave it the green light, and what I thought was crazy is that it did it on a shoestring budget almost, at $4 million, and they shot this film in the same year, in 2005. They shot this film in 25 days, starting from April, and it went all the way down to like almost mid-May, end of May, and during that whole time, you know, they were doing all the editing, posts, and all that, and then boom, it came out in October, and then by January, it was already released on DVD, which was the #1 selling DVD that Lionsgate Film has ever produced. It was crazy, you know? They had, you know, what I was thinking with the Saw franchise, it was everybody's generation of horror. Does that make sense? You know, if you lived in the 80s, you had, you know, Jason, you had Freddy Krueger. You know, the 90s, you had Ghostface, you know? And when it came down to the 2000s, we had fucking Saw. That's one of the main reasons why I love this whole franchise. But anyways, with Saw 2, I'll break it down for you guys and throw in all the little tidbits and everything like that, because there's some interesting points. A lot of people really didn't know about a lot of stuff that I'm probably going to bring out to you guys. So, with Saw 2, it starts off like any other Saw film, you know, Lionsgate film. And it shows my favorite part where it comes down where it says Twisted Pictures, and then you see this barbed wire wrapping around, it pulls back, and you know, I fanboy out every time I see it in theaters, like, oh shit, the movie hasn't even started yet. But anyways, it starts off, you know, like the first film, where it starts showing the gleaming area and everything. There's a light bulb that starts flickering, and all of a sudden, you know, you see the camera move around. And then it shows this dude where he's like kind of tied down and he's screaming, help, help, and he's wearing a fucking death mask, which is where he has like the front part and a back part, and if it closes up, it's got nails, kind of like the old schools for coffins, right? And so anyways, he's flipping out, he gets up, and then all of a sudden the screen starts, and guess who it is? It's none other than the man himself, Jigsaw, and he's voicing it through Billy the Puppet. The reason why he put this guy in a trap is because he basically said, hey, you made a living watching others.
I call you unworthy of the body you possess, of the life that you've been given.
So, we're gonna test that. And then he basically shows him that, you know, here's your body, not less than 2 hours ago. Don't worry, you're sound asleep and can't feel a thing. And it shows somebody limping over there, and he puts, you know, he's messing with his face. And he goes, take into the account that you're at a great disadvantage. I'm gonna give you a clue. And then it shows the x-ray with the key underneath his fucking eye. And he goes, it's right before your eyes. Oh, man. I love the fucking hints that they gave out in this film. And so he says, okay, time is ticking. You know, would you give up the one thing worth living to survive? How much blood would you shed? And then the guy's like flipping out. And he's like, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? And that's when he starts to freak out. He ends up pulling and then all of a sudden snaps the wire, and then all of a sudden the clock starts ticking on the mask. And what's cool about this mask, even though it's a death mask, a lot of people get it mixed up and call it the Venus flytrap. And it works like that, how it closes, but in the film they call it the death mask. It was weird. I know there's that misconception on it out there. But anyways, you know, the guy starts flipping out. He sees his toolbox, he opens it up, and it ends up being this one scalpel. And, you know, he starts putting the scalpel close to his eye, and he's looking in the mirror. And then, he either tries to go through with it, and then he's like, and he's like, fuck, and he throws it on the ground, help me! Then the clock finally starts ticking, and then he knows it's gonna end, so he's like, no, snap! Right? It closes right on him, then he falls down. Then it starts off the film, and I was just like, holy shit! You can't have a good film start off like that without an opening like that, you know? It was fucking amazing. I love that fucking scene. Now it shows another guy walking through the hall, and you end up finding out that it's Donnie Wahlberg's character, right? Donnie Wahlberg, what I love about him in this film, the only film that he basically had done before was The Sixth Sense. He played in the beginning part, and so this was kind of like his coming out party with this. And a lot of people know Donnie Wahlberg because he's a New Kids on the Block. But he did really good in this role. But anyways, it shows that he's walking down this hall and he talks to the security guard. And he's like, yeah, I'm here to pick him up. And it's implied that he had to go pick up his son because his son got caught doing something illegal, I guess stealing or whatever. And you find out a few seconds later it was because of stealing. So he's walking out and he starts talking to his son. His son's name is Dan. And his son is played by Eric Knudsen, who later on stars in other franchises like Scream 4 and stuff like that. But anyways, they're walking down and, you know, they start talking. And you find out that him and his wife are going through a divorce, and the kid's kind of in the middle, and he's going through all this troubled shit. And then, you know, he's like, oh, so you think you're a tough guy because you can steal? He's like, since when did you start becoming a cop instead of a dad? You know, the kind of all the bickering that, you know, kids, if they want to be assholes, they say that shit out. And so that's when he's like, well, I think I should go back to mom's. And he's like, what? Say that shit again. He's like, I think I should go back. And he doesn't even let him finish. And he tells him, well, then go! So, you know, later on he leaves, and then that's when it's implied that it's like a day or two later, and he's calling his son off the hook on there on the cell phone. And he's telling his son, hey, I'm sorry about the other day. I haven't heard from you. Give me a call back. Then he, you know, sits on his bed, and then he gets a call, and he thinks it's his son, but it ends up being, you know, the police chief. He's like, sorry, chief, I thought you were my kid. Okay. So he goes out to the crime scene, and what I thought was cool, they brought back fucking Dina Meyer. I was like, oh, shit! Dina Meyer, she's one of my other favorite actresses because she played Batgirl. Of all things, she played Batgirl in the TV series Birds of Prey, but she was also in the first SaW film as Detective Carey. So she plays Detective Carey in Part 2, and she's the lead investigator of the whole Jigsaw case, right? So she calls him in and says, hey, we need you to ID this guy. And he goes, oh, no problem. Let me look at his face and we'll see what's going on. And she goes, there lies the problem. Because that's when they go in and they see that the guy from the Death Trap mask, he has it still on, and then that's when he's looking around. Then he finally sees, you know, the jigsaw piece cut out. Then he goes, well, when are you going to tell me about that? Well, I wanted you to see for yourself. And, you know, then he looks around, he sees that he has a tattoo on his leg. He's like, yep, that's Mike. And they kind of have this bickering discussion where he's just like, well, you know, he's an informant. Look it up in the phone book. He's got a long list of enemies. And then Carey called him out and said, well, look closer, Detective Matthews. And, you know, he comes back like, what the fuck do you say? And she's like, don't ask me. Ask the guy who wrote it on the ceiling. So he's looking up, and then it flashes forward into where they're at the police station. Then they start discussing where, you know, Detective Matthews, he starts calling her out. And, you know, I guess he was embarrassed at the crime scene. And he starts talking about how he has all this desk work to do and his wife's divorce lawyers and his son becoming a criminal. He goes, I think I got a fucking full caseload. And it's implied that they had some kind of little romantic thing kind of going on because she's like, okay, well, what about the fact that I'm asking you? And he's like, whatever, you know, and then she blows him off and basically says, so since when did you become a desk cop? And that's when he's at home trying to sleep, and then he starts, you know, remembering everything from the crime scene. And that's where it shows, it says Wilson Steele on the actual mask. And so he wakes up and he's like, oh shit, and then he calls everybody. And then it shows other characters that are important later on in the sequels, right? You meet the actor, Lyric Bent, and he plays the character of Detective Rigg. Detective Rigg, he doesn't become a detective in this one, he becomes a detective in the fourth one. But at the time, he was just like your average police officer, and he's already, you know, setting everybody up, you know, the whole SWAT crew. Okay, we're gonna go through over here. I know this area. If we come in here through this way, it's gonna scare the shit out of anybody. And that's when you see Detective Matthews coming along, and then Carrie's like, okay, well, I thought you wanted to stay behind the desk. Oh, I'm just here for the ride. So they go out there to Jigsaw's lair. It's not at the Gideon meatpacking plant at this one. This one is at the Wilson Steel factory. And while they're going through the whole factory, you see, you know, John Kramer. He's just sitting right there eating his bowl of cereal. Then he's like, oh, fuck. They're coming in. And that's when the SWAT team, they go in, they find the spot of the stairs, they go up, they crack it open, they go in. And all of a sudden, one of the SWAT officers, he steps on a plank of wood going up the stairs. It sets off a semi-mini trap, because then all of a sudden you see Billy the Puppet come out, and you actually see the physical puppet, and then it, you know, the light comes on, he turns, and then he starts laughing. And then he steps one more time, then the plank falls through, and it pushes a board right through his legs, and it snaps his whole fucking legs. The whole fence and everything where they're wired in, it's all electrified. Then Detective Riggs like, fuck, we need backup, get in here now! Get in here now! Baker Chief, get in here now! So they get there, and then they see that the cop is down. They pull him out, and then that's when they all finally get up there, and they see John, where he's just sitting up there holding his hands up like this, and they're all like, down on your knees! He's like, I'm afraid I can't do that. Then you see everything all hooked up to him, the IV bag, all the shit like that, because he has cancer, right? From the first one. They play into that continuity of it. And once they, you know, see him there, then they said, okay, we're going to get some restraints on him. They handcuff him and everything. Detective Matthews comes up and he looks at him face to face and he goes, hey, is this close enough? He's like, okay, get him out of here. And then that's when John says, well, you can't let me leave yet until, you know, you take care of that matter in the other room. And, you know, he's like, what other room? He's like, over there. So he goes over there in the other room, which is on the cross of the other side. Opens this fence, they check it first to see if it's not electrified. They go in there and they start pulling all this covers off these monitors, and they see the monitor of like 5 people. Out of those people, it ends up being one of them was Detective Matthews' kid. And so he starts flipping out, and he's like, what the fuck? He goes, I think he's got my kid, that's my kid over there. So he goes up there to him and he goes, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? He goes, oh, that's your son Daniel, remember? And, you know, I haven't seen the monitors in a while, but I'm pretty sure he's scouring the corner. And then that's when he snaps and says, you motherfucker, tell me what it is. He's like, oh, yeah, you know, you have about 2 hours to go in there and save him. If not, the nerve gas that I have rolling around in there will eat up his body and everything like that. And he starts laughing, and he's like, oh, yes, there will be blood. Oh, yes. And so Detective Matthews, he's all flipping out, like, tell me where he is. And this part is what made the whole movie, is when he looks at him, and then he looks down, and then he goes, he's in a safe place. And it's like, oh, shit, okay. So if you know SaW films, you know what I'm talking about, right? So that's when he starts flipping out, and he goes back over there to the monitors, and he's like, give me a fucking phone. He starts dialing on the phone, and then it goes straight to voicemail, and it ends up hearing John's voice. And John, you know, he's also Jigsaw. Oh, hello, you reached Daniel's phone. He's not in right now. And then he's like, fuck, he's got my kid. So he's looking at the monitor, and he starts tearing up because he doesn't know what to do. At this point, now it zooms in on the monitor and you meet all the other different characters. Besides Daniel being there, you have all these other characters that are in there. You have Abby, who's played by Timothy Bird. Then you have a big dude named Gus, played by Tony Napo. Then you have another character named Jonas, played by Glenn Plummer. And then you also have Beverly Mitchell, who plays the character of Laura, which this is an interesting casting because, you know, Beverly Mitchell, she's always done, you know, very proper TV shows, and, you know, this was her first dabble into horror films, so everyone's like, what the fuck? The Seventh Heaven Girl's in this film? Yes, she was in this film. Interesting, right? Then you have Xavier, played by Frankie G. Now, at the same time, when I was thinking about this and doing research for the episode, they wanted Henry Rollins to play the character of Xavier, which would have been like, holy shit, that would have been badass, but due to time constraints, Henry Rollins couldn't do it, so they ended up getting Frankie G to play the part. And at the same time, what it does, it shows all of them that they're all talking. They're all like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And, you know, they start discussing like, oh, well, I guess you've never been drunk before. And Gus, you know, the big guy, he was basically telling, no, I've been drunk before. This is kidnapping. And then that's what he starts talking about. I saw this movie about this guy going to war zone, then bam, he was taken in and locked in into a room, and he was in there for 9 years. And, you know, he didn't see the light of day. Just random shit like that. And then as they're all discussing about who they think it could be, right? Then you see Amanda wake up, and then she's like all freaking out. Then you see another character, her name is Addison, and it's played by Emmanuel Vagar. And woo-wee, she's one of my favorite actresses in this film. But anyways, it shows Amanda's waking up, she's throwing up, and then she's like, where am I? And they're all like, well, we don't know, we all just woke up. And she's like, fuck! fuck? And she's tearing up everything. Because at this point of the film, Amanda had already survived his test in the first film. Like, oh shit, Amanda's back. What the fuck happened, right? Nobody got the memo on that. So she starts flipping all around and everyone's like, what the fuck? So she sees this brick, you know, this wall of bricks. She starts tearing it down, she pulls it out, and then Jonas comes up there and he goes, what the fuck is this? Everything you need to know is on this tape. They play it, and then that's when Jigsaw starts talking about, hello and welcome. You're all part of my test. And then that's when he starts telling them, hey, you've been in this house and breathing in this nerve agent. And, you know, if you don't find an antidote within 2 hours, you'll be dead. You know, and the house is going to open up in 3 hours. So, even if they try to hold off and escape, they're not going to escape unless they get the antidote, right? And so, after that, he basically implies a lot of the clues from the first film, which I thought was really cool, you know. There's a safe in front of you, you know. The combination to the safe is, you know, on the back of your mind. And I was going to say back of the necks, because it's actually tattooed on their neck. But he says it's in the back of your mind, and the clues could be found over the rainbow. And then he says, you know, be sure to look out for that X marks the clue spot. And then what I thought was cool is that they tied in a lot of aspect from the first film, which was really kind of pretty cool. You know, they were following their own guidelines that they had made. And, you know, in that whole thing that they found an envelope, they tear open the envelope, and they find this key, and there was a note, and it says, do not use this key to open that door. And that's when they're like, okay, fuck this. So Xavier and Gus go over there, and, you know, Amanda says, you know, the note said, don't use the key on the door. So he's like, well, it's all a big goddamn joke, and I'm gonna prove it to you, right? So he goes over there, he opens the key, Gus is looking through the hole, and all of a sudden, boom! A fucking .357 round goes through his face. They're all flipping the fuck out, and Jonas is like, what the fuck is this? It's Jigsaw. Who the fuck is Jigsaw? And that's when they start kind of like freaking out. Then eventually the door opens up. And I thought what was pretty cool is that they were able to go walk around the house, and they're kind of looking around and everything like that. And then Xavier's like, okay, fuck you guys, I'm going to try and get out. And what's cool about the tape is that the tape said they all share something in common. And the main thing in common is that, you know, Xavier, he had a tattoo of a jail where he stayed at. And so Jonas is like, oh yeah, I've done time. So 3 people have already done time that they admitted, right? And so they're going through and everything like that, looking around the house. And then it goes back into Detective Matthews, how he's kind of freaking out, and he's just like trying to figure out what the fuck Jigsaw wants. And Jigsaw's like, okay, well, I want to play a game. And he's like, what? And Jigsaw tells him, all you have to do is just sit here and talk to me. Nobody around us, just me and you, we talk. And he goes, okay. He goes, let me see what we can do. So he goes back and he tells Detective Carey he wants to fucking talk. And then she's telling him, like, hey, this is his MO, this is what he likes to do, just humor him for a bit. Buy us some time, because they were gonna call the bomb squad because there was a timer that was ticking down, and then they were also gonna call, you know, the tracers to come back and trace it and see where the live feed is coming from, so they can try and go and get it. And while that's going on, then all of a sudden it shows that Xavier, he finds his bat with fucking nails through it, and he sees a door that says exit, and so he's like, okay, it's all wood, it's plaster, it's not a fucking fortress. And so he starts breaking up this fucking door,
It's a
and
fucking
he's just
house.
going to fucking town on it. And then he sees that there's metal bars locking it, and that's when Addison's like, well, I guess the macho bullshit didn't work. And he's like, well, look at you, the only thing you know how to open is between your legs. I mean, there's some dark humor in there, and what's pretty cool is that they improv that shit. Like 90% of this film was all part of the script, but then they also did, you know, they had a little bit of leeway to improv some stuff, which worked out really well. And then Amanda comes in, she kicks on the lights, and she is basically talking about the whole thing, like, hey, we gotta look for clues. And as that's going on, Laura, she's going around, and she's like, hey, I found a door! So they go down this door, and it's into this basement, right? And as they're looking around, they see that it's this furnace, and it's a furnace used for crematory, right? They see that there's this doll. I think it's a victim because it doesn't look like a doll or anything, but they see this note on this dummy and they rip it out and it said Abby, and they're looking all around and they see that it has a tape on there. And then they put it in there and they start listening to the tape, and Xavier's like, who the fuck is Obi? And he's like, my name is Abby. And then on the fucking tape it says, hello, Obi. I start fucking laughing, dude, because it's like, okay, his name was Abby, but even Jigsaw called him Obi. And so they start talking about, hey, you know, there's 2 antidotes in there. One, I'm going to give you out there so that way, as a way of saying thank you to help me catch the others. And the other one is in there for you to get so you can give to the others. And he told him that, you know, when you're in hell, only the devil can help you out.
Only the devil can
And
help
that was
you
a
out.
big clue right there. Especially if you're going into a fucking furnace. And so that's when they're deciding, okay, well, who's going to go in there? Xavier's like trying to scare him, like, hey, you're going to go in there or I'm going to cut you. And he goes, well, if you're gonna scare me, at least cut me a little. If I go in there, I'm getting one. So he goes in there, and he gets the easy antidote. And he's like, thank you, Abby. And they're all kind of discussing to see, like, who's gonna get the antidote. And he pulls the other one, and the fucking furnace door shuts. And he starts flipping out, open the fucking door! And then the crematory starts. And the reason why you know it's a crematory, because it starts with the flames at the end. And it starts coming up to him. And he's flipping out. And so, you know, they're trying to open the door. I can't, it's too fucking hot. Addison's screaming, you know, use your coat! Use your fucking coat! And then he gets to the end, and then, you know, Daniel comes up and he's like, hey, there's a door at the end with a window. We could break it open and pull him out. So they go and they break the window open and try to get Abby out. And Abby, you know, he's sitting there and he's all flipping out, just like, you know, holding his mouth. And the reason why he's holding his mouth is because you got to understand, fire, it needs a lot of oxygen to burn, right? So if you breathe, you know, you're basically feeding the fire and it's going to burn your whole insides and shit, especially if you're in clothes like that. And while he's freaking out about it, it shows this little devil pointing to this valve, and it says, devil can help you out. And I thought it was like, oh shit, that was my favorite fucking scene of this film. One of my favorites, actually. And so he's flipping the fuck out. And so they finally break open the window, and Jonas, you know, he's leaning through there, and he reaches out and hits Jonas in the face. And you know, behind the scenes, he actually really did hit him in the face, to the point where he, like, they had to stop filming for a day or two because it fucked up his eye. And you see it for a second where he turns over and he's like this the whole time. And it shows Abby reaching out, and then he dies. And then Xavier starts flipping the fuck out. He goes, the needles! He's got the fucking needles! I want the needles! Where? Give me those fucking needles! And, you know, Amanda's all pissed. She starts walking up the steps back up to the house, and she goes, he had a choice. And while that's going on, then you see all the police officers, and especially Detective Matthews, is flipping the fuck out. And he's like, oh, fuck, what are we gonna do now? And, you know, Carrie tells him, hey, do this for me. Go in there and just humor him, buy him some time. So, you know, Detective Matthews goes over there and he starts talking to him. And John starts talking to him about the game. He goes, okay, the rules are simple. You just gotta talk to me. That's all you gotta do. Talk to me, and I'll tell you where your son is. And, you know, it's the thing, you'll find out later on why he wanted to do that. And so he starts talking to him about different things. And that's when they start giving the whole backstory of Jigsaw, which I thought was badass. I mean, it kind of, I guess you could say it hinders later on in the sequels of the stories of things like that, especially how during this time they had so many fucking promotions out for this film. It's insane. They had promotions like sneak peeks and stuff like that. These are some of my old classic collections right here. They were giving this shit out when, you know, whenever you shopped at Hot Topic, they would give out free promotional DVDs. I was like, oh shit! I still got plenty of these. And what I thought was cool is that they explained the whole backstory of him, about how, you know, he went through cancer and everything like that. And he goes, it's a shame that my cells, they can't repel cancer. But, you know, I wanted to die after that, and I took a plunge off the cliff, and yet I survived that. And he goes, after that, I decided I was going to change my ways. And so he tells this whole, basically, a quick 5-minute summary about how he got started into it. And then that's when, you know, Detective Matthews just starts saying, you know, he's getting all fed up with his shit, and he's like, oh, this bullshit. And he goes, don't forget the rules. And so he starts walking back. As that goes on, then you see the rest of the crew back at the house. They're all kind of like getting sick even worse because this nerve agent's going through. And as they're going through it, they finally find this other door. And when they find this other door, they go in there. So they get in the room, and so Xavier, he's looking through all the walls and everything, seeing if he can try and open the door. And they find the tape for Xavier, and they start playing it. And the tape, the tape calls out Xavier and says, okay, there's a key to open the door, but you got to go through this pit. It'd be finding a needle in the haystack. And it's implied that Xavier was a drug dealer, and, you know, he made his living off of selling drugs to people and kids. And so, you know, they move up this bed, and there's this fucking pit with all these needles. And they're all like, okay, who's going to fish in there? And then Xavier's all pissed off, so he looks at Amanda, he picks her up. Nobody fucking stops him because he's this big-ass dude, and he throws her in the fucking needle pit. And everyone's just like, oh, shit. I love this fucking scene because this scene is so brutal because, you know, she's throwing on all these syringe needles. And what's crazy about the syringe needles, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, most of them are all plastic. To a certain point, yes. I'm a medical nerd. They still use glass syringes, but they only use them in rare, extreme cases like in cancer patients and things like that. But all these syringes, they're all fucking glass. And if you've ever seen a syringe, how they're so sharp and how they can easily get into you, is because of the fact they have like a cut corner that they call a bell, and it's got a sharp edge known as a barb. A barb is basically like a fishing hook. As soon as you get a fishing hook on you, it's stuck, and you gotta guide that shit out the same way it came in. And so when she's going through the needle pit, he's like, hurry up, hurry up, we don't have that much time. She's screaming at him, fuck you! So she's digging through, and she pulls out the key and throws it out. And then Daniel helps her out. And then by the time he opens the door, it's already too late, you know, and he's like, no, no, no. And he's all pissed off, and they're all trying, you know, to back him off. And then that's when Addison's like, stop this bullshit! And Amanda, you know, she's right there. And as she's, you know, like leaning on the ground and everything like that, they're pulling all the fucking syringes out. And it's crazy because Daniel was pulling them all out, trying to help her out. And then that's when Addison said, we got to listen to that tape. It said he knows us. He knows who we are and what we have in common. We share something in common. Then that's when Laura comes in. She goes, jail. You guys, all three, have said you've been in jail. Make it 4, you know? And then they tried to figure out what she was in jail for. She's like, doesn't even matter. But in the comic that they had, during the time, they made this comic called SaW Rebirth. One of my favorite fucking comics. I still have it in packaging, as you can tell. I got a bunch of these. In the comic, they basically implied the fact that the reason why she was arrested is because she was a shoplifter. And so anyways, while that scene's going on, they start pulling out all the syringes and everything. And then it goes back to Detective Matthews, where, you know, he's trying to decide what the hell he wants to do because he sees that he saw the whole scene on the monitor, flipping out. And then that's when he comes up and he starts talking to John again, and he starts telling him, hey, tell me where my kid is. I'm done with this talking. He goes, you wanted to play a game. Now you want to talk. It's all bullshit nonsense. And he goes, well, just remember the rules. And that's when he goes back and starts talking to Carrie. And, you know, once he's starting to talk to Carrie and Rig, they basically said, okay, we're going to have to do it old school method, right? Old school method is basically, you know, they're going to get all of his work and try to fuck with him, get him pissed off, right? So after that, that's when he grabs all of his work, you know, everything, because you see all the drawings of the reverse bear trap, you see all of his plans from this film, and you actually see some winks in there for later on in the sequels, believe it or not. He goes over there, he sees all his work, and he starts ripping it. He goes, well, how are you going to convict me if you got no evidence? And, you know, that's when Jigsaw's just egging him on, and he's like, you know, how does it feel to be a dad to have a son who fucking hates him? And then that's when he snaps and points at him, shut the fuck up! Then it goes back and follows everybody in the house. And while they're in the house walking around, that's when you start seeing Laura, the gas is already taken up on her really strong. So she falls down, and then she's like, you know, last minutes of her breath. And, you know, she's like, X marks the spot. We found the clue! Because it shows a picture tilted with a cracked X on it. And that's when they start looking at it, and they pull it down. Addison pulls it down, she turns it over, and it's a picture of Detective Matthews and Daniel. And and on the back of it, it said father and son. And then they start looking at the picture, they're all like, that's your dad? And he's like, well, yeah. That's the guy that put me away! I was innocent! And they all figured out that they're all connected because of the fact they all been in jail, and Detective Matthews' son is in there with all the people that he wrongly accused and put him in jail. And as they're all figuring that out, then that's when you see Laura, she starts having like the grand mal seizure. Grand mal seizure is where it's like fucking shakes your whole fucking body, she starts throwing up and everything like that, and then she dies. And it's because of the nerve gas. With the nerve gas that they have, bringing in my medical science training, what nerve gas does, it affects all the cells, it pops them little by little on the outside, on your peripheral nervous system. And then eventually once it gets to your central nervous system, your spine and brain, that's when you start having the seizures and you're fucked. And that's what happened with Laura. And once that happens, Addison was just like, I'm on my own, fuck you guys. So she walks her one way, and then Amanda's like, I can't believe you didn't tell me this. And she leaves him. And Daniel's like, don't leave me. And then that's when they start flipping out, right? And then while that's going on, then it shows that Xavier goes back to the original room, and he starts looking around and starts listening to the tape and remembering it. And when he remembers the tape, he says, okay, there's numbers on the back of your mind. And then he sees Gus laying down, and he sees that there's a number tattooed on his neck. And he's like, oh, fuck. And so now it starts to click with him. And they're all kind of fucked up, throwing up blood and everything like that because of the nerve gas. Jonas comes in, and he goes, hey, man, the others, they're scared of you. And he goes, I like it that way. He goes, man, we could be talking shit like we at the yard, man, but I got family outside these fucking walls, man. They're going to come after my family. And I thought it would have been cool if they would have did a story on Jonas, but they never did for some reason. But anyways, that's when Xavier starts flipping out. He pulls out the knife. He goes, turn around. And Jonas is like, what? What? You know, just his expression, thinking that it was like the, you know, dropping the soap kind of gag joke. But then he's like, turn around. And then that's when they start duking it out and fighting. They have a scuffle. And then eventually, you know, he stops beating up Xavier because he's throwing up. Xavier picks up the baseball bat with fucking nails on it, and he cracks him in the back of the head. And he's like, my son of a... And he falls down, and then, you know, he looks in the back of his neck and sees another number. And then that's when Xavier's like, oh, I can open this safe now that I know that everybody has a tattooed number on the back of their neck. So they start going through and they start looking at, you know, he goes downstairs in the furnace trap. He sees Abby's neck and everything like that. Then it shows Addison. She finally wakes up and then she's like, ugh, you know, still dazed. And she goes into this room, and what I like about this trap was crazy. It had chains holding up a box, and it's a clear box where you put your hands through and you can grab the syringe, you know, with the antidote. But right above it, there's a lock. And if you watch this film in widescreen or in full screen, you can see that there's a lock with a key already in it. All you gotta do is just turn the key and then everything comes down. Well, she didn't see that because the nerve gas fucking up with her brain and messing with her mind. And so she goes in there and she sees the note and it says Gus, and she's like, ugh, throws it back, and then she puts her hand in there, tries to grab the syringe, and then she couldn't pull her hand back out because it's fucking rigged with razor fucking blades. So she's stuck right there trying to get it, and instead of using her other hand to try to lift it up, she puts her other hand in there, and now she's stuck in there. And so she's flipping the fuck out, and then she's trying to pull the syringe out, and then she pulls the syringe and it spills everywhere, and she's stuck in this box, and she's screaming, help, no! And as she's pulling more, it's cutting deeper and deeper into her skin. And that's when she starts screaming. And then that's when you see Xavier, he starts flipping the fuck out. Hey kid, Amanda, where are you? And then that's when Amanda starts seeing that Jonas was dead. She's like, oh fuck. So she runs up, grabs Daniel, and they start running. And Xavier's chasing after him. And they're starting running around the house trying to hide. And that's when, you know, they come up and then, you know, they meet face to face, and he's looking at her and he's like, don't run. And then she screams, ah! And they start fucking running. At this point, you know, Detective Matthews, he sees everything going on the monitor. He starts flipping the fuck out. So he pulls out his 1911, puts it in his, you know, in his holster, and then that's when he leaves, and then Rig is backing off Carrie, because Carrie's like, hey, don't do this, don't do this. And then that's when he fucking goes full ape shit, man. Detective Matthews, he flips over the table, and then he punches him in the face. Tell me where my fucking son is. He beats the shit out of him. And keep this in mind, John has cancer. And he's like, that's Detective Matthews that they gave medals for. He beats the shit out of him even more, and he goes, not much longer till your son's pissing blood. And then he goes up to him, and he sees his finger, and he snaps it back, breaks his fucking fingers, beats the shit out of him. And while that's going on, Amanda and Daniel, they get back into the room, and, you know, they're holding the door, and they say, okay, we can't hold this fucking door. They get the bat with the nails, and they latch it on there. Then they see that there's like a basement that they can lift up the door and go down. They're like, where the fuck is the key? So they're looking around, and they're like, oh shit, Jonas still had the key. So they pull the key out of Jonas's dead body, open it, and then that's when they go down under, and then that's when Xavier finally breaks in. He's like, where the fuck are you guys? No, no! And they start running down in this, like, I guess you could say like the sewer system would look like. So they're running all around. Xavier's following right behind him. And while that's going on, then all of a sudden, you know, Detective Matthews pulls out his gun and he goes, open your fucking mouth. He puts the gun in Jigsaw's mouth and he goes, you gonna tell me where they're at? He's like, oh. And then he's like, what'd you say? He pulls out the gun. Game over. I'll tell you, I'll take you to the house, but only you. And he's like, all right. And he goes, there's a button right there. This is an elevator. So he pushes the button, they go down. All the SWAT team, they're flipping the fuck out. They're like, where the fuck is he gone? And Detective Matthews, he hauled ass. He picked up John and threw him in the van. They started the van and they're driving through. And he's like, if I don't find my son, you're fucking dead. And he's driving fast and he shows the cutscenes where they're driving by. And then that's when he starts, you know, telling him, hey, where to? John, he starts telling him, where to? And John doesn't respond. So he goes, where to now? And he fucking punches him in the side of the head. And he's like, oh, you go down over here. You make a right, straight ahead. And then he says, last house on the left. And I was like, oh shit, another horror reference right there. How fucking amazing is this, right? And so as that's going on, he finally gets to the house. And as he finally gets to the house, then the cops, they find a trace where the other house is being played at, the game, right? So that's where they go and they all hustle and bustle and they get over there. They tear down the house and it shows that they're in one house, Detective Matthews is in another house, and then it shows how Amanda and Daniel, they start going around, they see the sliding door, they open up the sliding door, and they go in. They close the sliding door and they turn on the lights. And wouldn't you know, it's the fucking bathroom scene from Saw 1. And I was like, oh shit, it's all connected in this, right? And that's when they're all looking around, they see Adam where he's like sitting on the corner dead as a corpse. So now you know what happened to Adam after the end of Saw 1. You know, Dr. Gordon never came back for his ass. You see Zep's dead body, you see all the blood in the middle that, you know, John was laying down in. And you see the severed fucking foot already, like, you know, turning into a prune and everything like that from what Dr. Gordon had cut off his foot. And then they start looking all around and everything like that. And while that's going on, then that's when Detective Rigg, he was already over there at the other house, and he goes, Carrie, where are you at? I don't see you. I don't fucking see you. You know, and him and Carrie, they're talking. And all of a sudden, they see this room with monitors and a VCR. They pause the VCR, and then that's when it goes into Carrie's spot, and she's like, this shit's not live. So it wasn't even a live feed, and it was like, oh shit, what the fuck is going on? Like, they're flipping out. We're in the wrong fucking house. And while that's going on, you see Detective Matthews going through the house. He sees everybody dead. And then he goes down into, you know, he sees the door open going down to the basement, into the sewers. And as he's going down, he's screaming, Daniel! Daniel! He's running right behind him. So now, you know, he's chasing Xavier. And he's, you know, basically right behind him. And that's when Xavier comes into the bathroom. He opens up. And then that's when Amanda's, you know, like, sitting there crying. He's gone! He's gone! I don't care about the kid. I just want the number on the back of his neck. And she goes, what makes you think I'm going to tell you? And then that's when he's like, oh shit, and he starts looking in the mirrors and they're all fucked up. And then she goes, I'll never tell you. And then that's when he starts, you know, going crazy, and he fucking snaps. He pulls out the knife and he cuts the chunk out of his neck. And then he sees it and then he puts it in his pocket. And as he puts it in his pocket, he gets ready to charge up like he's gonna stab him and shit. And then all of a sudden, that's when Daniel, he wakes up, no! Kicks him in the leg and in the gut. And then he pulls out the hacksaw, the one good hacksaw that Adam still had on his side. Cuts his fucking throat open, and then he's like gushing blood, and then he's like going down to his knees chasing after the kid. Then he falls backwards and dies, and it's like, oh fuck! And Daniel, he's just like crying right there, and then it shows Amanda like smiling for a split second. And while that's going on, then it goes back to Carrie, and then all of a sudden they hear this noise because the timer went off. And when the timer went off, all of a sudden they're like, and they start flipping the fuck out. They run over there where the elevator was, where it went down. And they see there was a safe right there, and the safe pops open. It ends up being fucking Daniel. Like, oh shit, that was Detective Matthews' test. All he had to do was just sit there and wait, and his son would be right there in a safe place. Oh shit, it was crazy. And then that's when it shows Detective Matthews. He goes through, and he opens up, and he's stuck in the bathroom. And he doesn't turn on the light or anything. He sees that everybody's all dead, Xavier's dead. And then it shows that Xavier's body's already decomposing. And then he sees his hand sticking out of the tub. So he goes out to the tub to look, and then it ends up being somebody in the pig mask that puts, you know, a syringe on him and knocks him out. Then it shows Detective Matthews where he's laying down, and he wakes up and there's this gun, but he's got no bullets in it. They took the bullets out. And so he sees that he's trying to get up, and he's chained up to the side where Adam's at. And then all of a sudden, you know, he sees a tape player, he starts playing.
Hello,
then you hear
Eric.
it's Amanda's voice, and I was like,
Probably don't even
oh,
remember
fuck,
me.
this is an amazing fucking twist. And then, you know, Amanda starts saying, well, I was guilty of a lot of things, but I wasn't guilty of the charge you framed me for. And then it shows how, you know, it shows her backstory now. It shows how she got tested and everything like that, and she survived, and then she started, you know, doing bad shit again, cutting herself, getting back into drugs. And it shows that she was talking to John and learning Jigsaw's ways, basically. And so, you know, it shows a scene where he was, like, talking to her and everything. And it's all quick cutback scenes of everything, of how everything all started for Saw 2. How she's all decked out and everything, how she has her wrist all taped up. And as he's listening to the end of the tape, you know, that's when Amanda comes out from the side of the door, and she looks at him, and he's all shocked, like, what the fuck? Because he had framed her and set her up and got her arrested. Then all of a sudden, you know, she looks at the door and looks at him. They have a good 2-second glare at each other, and then she closes the door and says, game over. And then he gets all pissed off and starts throwing his gun. I'll fucking get you, you fucking bitch! You fucking bitch! He's screaming so loud, it's echoing outside. And then you see John in the van where he's like sitting there all beat up, laughing and smiling. And then that's the end of Saw 2, and it was just like, holy shit! I mean, you can't do a fucking sequel any better than that film. You really can't. Personally, for me, I love Saw 2. It's very, very hard to make a choice of what's my favorite Saw film of all time. Because of the fact of, you know, with Saw, they've always had that good continuity with it. You know, part 2 tied in all the fact of how John had cancer and how he got started and the whole backstory and everything like that. But what's interesting about this film, they shot it less than a month. They packaged it all in the same year and got it out, released in theaters, and later on be released in January of 2006. And it was like, holy shit, they shot this film in a month, and, you know, it was all done in the same year. It's just amazing how much work and credit that they put into this, you know. But what I love about this film is that they did it on a shoestring budget of $4 million, as I said. And the way this film came about is they wanted to do a whole Saw sequel. And when they greenlighted it, they basically said to James Wan and Lee Winnell, okay, we want you to write Saw 2, and we want James Wan to direct. Well, James Wan couldn't do it, and Lee Winnell couldn't do it. because of the fact of they were working on another film at the time, which ended up being Dead Silence. They were doing that for Universal. So this is where Darren Boozman comes in, right? And he becomes a staple of the Saw franchise after Part 2, because, you know, he was a music video director, and he basically directed, you know, music videos for all these bands and shit like that, because music videos was a thing back in the day, kids. But anyways, you know, he was writing the script called The Desperate, and, you know, in his script, The Desperate, it's basically Saw 2 with different character names. That was it. And then, you know, you cut out the Detective Matthews and the jigsaw scene where they're talking and stuff like that. It's basically Saw 2. And word got around to one of the producers, Greg Hoffman. He saw the script and he says, hey, you guys got to see this. And they loved it so much they bought it, and they said, okay, we want Darren Boozman to come on to direct the film because it's his. And what they did is that they had Lee Winnell. He went through and made the writing changes and stuff like that. James Wan came back and he polished up the script and everything. And once they got that started, boom, they started filming, and we got Saw 2 right now. Interesting note too is that Saw became a staple because of the ending twist. Everybody loved the first ending twist, so they figured, okay, how are you going to top this film, right? How are you going to make it better than the first film? So what they did is that they had Amanda thrown into the mix. And then at the end, you find the twist that she was a part of it the whole time. It was just, they wanted to test Detective Matthews, which was really different. Because you find out later on in the other sequels, there wasn't that many survivors. And it was just, they topped the twist of the first one with this one. They really did. And, you know, the fact that it became the #1 Saw film out of the whole franchise. Until, I believe it was Jigsaw recently that came out. That one blew it out the numbers. But at the time, Saw 2... before Jigsaw came out, Saw 2 was the #1 grossing film out of all of them. Number 3, you know, came close to it, but number 2 was the one that really got it well known. And I think it has to do with the marketing. And as I said, they spent $4 million on the budget to make the film, but they spent a ton of money marketing it. And, you know, at the time, that's when they started doing, you know, the promotional things. Like at Hot Topic, they give you the promotional DVDs. They had, you know, the Rebirth comic where it tells you the backstory before you see the film. All that stuff. And it hyped up this film, and it did really good. And Saw 2 will always be, you know, of course, one of my favorites in the franchise. I can't say it's the top, but I mean, y'all know where I'm coming from with that. But if you talk to any other horror fan that if they've ever seen Saw films, or if they're not into like the gory films and things like that, if you ask them, hey, you seen Saw? Yeah, okay, well, which one did you see? Everyone's seen Saw 2. More so of Saw 2 than they have with Saw 1, which is kind of funny, but, you know, Saw 2, to most horror fans, that's always going to be their favorite sequel out of the franchise. And what's cool about what they did with Saw is that, you know, this was the regular cut, but later on, when they started releasing later films, they said, okay, well, Saw 3's coming out. They re-released Saw 2, but then they have it with the unrated DVD extra features. So it has, the only difference between the unrated and the rated is that it shows a little bit more of the gory scenes, 1 or 2 behind the scenes things of, you know, like extra scenes showing more backstory, which I thought was cool if they would have left it in, but I mean, time constraints, they couldn't fit it all in, so that's what they got with that. And of course, you had Charlie Closer come back to the series, which I thought was fucking amazing because he did great for the music in the first one. He came back and did the music for the second one, and later on for all the sequels of the film. And they also tacked in, you know, they had a legit soundtrack. They had Marilyn Manson on it, they had Mudvayne. They really did promote and push this film well out there. And that's why I think it's still one of the top films out there, one of the top sequels of this whole franchise. But thank you all for tuning in for episode 54 on Saw 2, a part of my favorite franchise of all time. And I will catch you all next time, as always.
Bow down to the cave.